Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today we want to share some of the reflections that we've had after about a year and a half on YouTube. We've been talking a lot amongst ourselves about just some reflections and lessons learned, and we thought it'd be interesting to share them in a video today.
We're also going to talk about the experience of working on something together as a couple, and also just how we feel about making content generally after doing it for a year and a half.
So just to give us a bit of structure, I have 4 broad buckets here that I think we can go through. So the first one being where we're at after a year in terms of numbers and expectations versus reality from when we first started. So I think this is a good one to start on because every time we talk to anyone and tell them that we have a YouTube channel, the first question usually tends to be, how many subscribers do you have? So when we first started on YouTube, we kind of sat together and did a bit of research and looked up the average amount of time it takes for someone to get monetized, which is getting 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time on your videos. And we found that to be about a year.
That was something that we both just kept in mind because the YouTube journey we know can be quite unpredictable, although there are certain things you can do to help that along. So 1 year was it, but I think we can both safely say that we're hoping for a little more than 1,000 subscribers in 1 year.
Now, we had a conversation at some point afterwards when we did reach 1,000 subscribers, and we were like, wow, we got there pretty quickly compared to what we thought. And I think we kind of had, we kind of said, I was hoping that we'd get, maybe about 5,000 subscribers in our first year, and that would be a really, really good benchmark. And I think you said something similar as well.
I actually found an old note that I wrote down in which I said I wanted 10,000 subscribers as like the reach goal after 1 year. Yeah. But I think we hit that after 6 months. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
there you go.
Great. But I think it's one of those things where it's fun to reflect on this and it's nice to talk to people about subscriber counts and stuff. But to be honest, I think the bigger part of it for both of us is really just the video making process and wanting to make videos that people enjoy watching and get something out of. I think the subscriber thing is funny because I think you almost care more about it when you first start, and afterwards it becomes just another metric, and people kind of ask you about it, but it's not really something that you're thinking about on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah. I think at most really it becomes a temporary distraction, but then at the end of the day, that itself will not be fulfilling if you're not fulfilled by, the process of what you're creating and what you're putting out as well.
Yeah. And I think it's always the best feeling when we get thoughtful comments on our videos or when people are engaging with us, telling us that, our videos have been helpful to them in some way. I think that is far more rewarding than just watching, the numbers go up. So I think that's the part of it which we kind of focus more on now. So the next big bucket is our approach to content creation and what's changed with the way that we approach making videos.
Definitely a lot. I think you go through different stages in the creator journey, and we're definitely in a very different stage now than when we first started, which was we were in a stage where we really want to share a lot about our legal careers and how we're managing the lifestyle working as corporate lawyers. And since we've both stepped away from our careers for about a year now, that definitely feels less relevant now, but a lot of the things we still cared about then, we still care about now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think when we first started, it was kind of 2 main focuses that we had with the videos that we were putting out. One being we wanted to make videos to help make the legal career itself a bit more transparent, because as students, we didn't feel like there were many resources to actually give insight into what it was like to be a lawyer. And the other side of it was also wanting to make things for other lawyers, because we were really obsessed with trying to optimize all of our free time and try to optimize our health, even though we had a job that could be really demanding. So it was also sharing things about that side of our lives that we, really cared about.
Work-life balance to the extent possible, because, schedules were unpredictable, but there were still ways that you could work around it.
Yeah. So something that we've been discussing a lot and, amongst ourselves is really just how do we move away from content that doesn't really feel super relevant to us anymore at our current stage in life, while also preserving the things that we think are helpful for you guys and helpful for people that potentially find our channel. And that's a hard balance to figure out, but we're working on it.
I think something we've been thinking a lot about recently, in addition to that, is the fact that YouTube is very interesting in that as we evolve and change as people, we get to bring people along, and it's very visible, right? And I think it's quite unusual, in that way.
Yeah. I would say as well that I think the process of just using the camera and figuring out how to use editing software and trying to make better videos on that front is also a really interesting one, because even in the short span of, a year and a half, I feel like the quality is upgraded by a good amount, and it's interesting how quickly things can change from, our first few videos to where we're at now with the way that we, produce these. So it's cool.
Even though the learning curve was super steep in the beginning, and arguably is still quite steep, because as the more we learn, like the more we feel like we don't know. We've both really enjoyed the process. It's also appealed to a lot of our natural interests because, you know, for instance, I've always been really interested on the more visually creative side of things, and Lloyd's always been very interested in the audio side of things. So I do a lot of the visuals for videos, and Lloyd does most of the music. And on top of that, I guess on a more personal note, it's the first time in my adult life I've gotten the time to invest a lot in pursuing something visually creative, which I think has been a very interesting journey because I knew I would like it, but there was always that little bit of doubt in which I wasn't sure if it's like, oh, I only really like it as a hobby I dabble in, but if I spend quite a lot of time doing it, maybe I'll end up not liking it.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I don't think I've ever thought about doing something creative in the strict sense of the term, or, you know, something in the field of creativity. Again, it feels like such a loaded word. You know, as someone who kind of always thought of myself as a bit of a robot and kind of not the creative type, it's interesting that I've also felt a lot of joy and a lot of, I guess, satisfaction with creating something. And I think it's the act of creation and the act of putting something together that we're really proud of and that we're happy to share with people that is always a really cool experience and is kind of a unique experience, I think, for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next big bucket is doing YouTube as work. And I think there's two sides to this. So the first is working with each other on something that we consider, you know, take very seriously as a project. And there's also the side of it, which is, you know, the more business side of YouTube. So let's start with the first one. You know, I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot, but I feel like we've gotten a lot better at working with each other on something after this whole experience with YouTube.
Yeah. It's something that we get quite a lot of questions about. I think what the experience of working together is like, because it's really one thing to date or be married, and it's another thing to work with each other.
100%, yeah. I think it was definitely, you know, there's that growing phase and a bit of pain in the beginning for sure when we start to, like, you know, learn a new side of each other and learn how to work with that. And I think that was difficult at first, but I think it's been, you know, one of those very rewarding experiences as well, where I feel like I understand you a lot better. You probably understand me a lot better too, from, you know, having done that.
Yeah, it has also forced us to improve our communication quite a lot, because I think, to be fair, we do tend to have quite strong feelings about certain things, but you know, it's when we're working together, this is a joint effort. So we can't just be extremely stubborn.
No, that's very true. It's very true. I think there is that compromise on, you know, direction of things, and sometimes we try things out that are the suggestion of, you know, one person, and we kind of go with it, and we kind of just see how it ends up playing out, which I think is good, because then we both have input, we both have our moments where, you know, our input is taken into consideration for certain things, and I think that's overall like a really good thing.
I think part of it actually is also learning what the division of labor should be, because we were both dabbling in a bit of like mostly everything in the beginning, but that gets so messy so quick. But then after a while you can tell who likes what more or is more efficient at what. So then it becomes a tidier process generally.
100%, yeah. I think my glasses are steaming up again. It's doing that thing. This is the issue also with filming in the summer in Hong Kong, or at least in the spring, I guess now. No air conditioning because it releases this like hum noise, and it's also very humid and kind of hot today, so yeah, we'll have to deal with this somehow, but anyways.
It's also been very interesting learning each of our individual sort of resistance points, or the things that we struggle with the most in terms of making content. And that's not something we really saw very much of before when we were both just working our own jobs in law firms.
It's also good that I think that we cover each other's bases really well. Because generally speaking, the things that M has a lot of resistance in doing, I tend to be a lot sort of more okay with doing. And the things that I have a lot of resistance with, you're really good at. So I think that's really good. And it kind of works out perfectly that way, which we're fortunate to have.
Still requires good communication though. I think initially actually we thought like, oh, it would be so easy to work together because we're quite complementary, and then we're like, oh, this is difficult.
I'm not gonna lie, like I think it's great for, like, it's been great for us, but I can understand why couples don't want to work with each other, and why it's probably not a good idea for every single couple. You know, there are moments where it's like, you know, you're butting heads and it's not the best experience. But again, you know, if you make it through the other side of that in a positive way, I think it's really good. But it can be a lot for sure.
No, I mean, objectively, it's hard. I think doing this YouTube in itself is hard, and then you add in this added component. It's also hard. It's
a completely new dimension or layer, I guess, to the relationship, and that's something that is complicated but fascinating and also rewarding if you can figure it out.
I think we learned a lot about each other.
100%.
Even though we had been together for 7 years before that, I feel like in the past year and a half, we learned like so much more.
Oh yeah. Moving on to the next part of it, which is, YouTube as a business. One of the things that's worth mentioning is that we actually haven't withdrawn any money from the account that we use for our YouTube channel, which receives payments from Google AdSense and also from the sponsors that we've chosen to work with. So it's interesting because I think when we first started, we were kind of like, oh, it'd be so cool when we get our first email requesting a sponsorship. And we thought that would come a lot later than it actually did. But you kind of realize, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but at least in our case and the types of videos that we were making, we started getting those emails pretty early on. And you kind of realize very quickly that there's only a very small pool of sponsors that, as creators, or just as people with certain interests and things that you actually really like, that you actually really want to work with. And that's something that is also the benefit of not really needing to look at YouTube as something to monetize so quickly.
Or I suppose like you must rely on it as a source of income.
Yeah.
Which I think sort of really changes your objectives quite a bit.
Yeah, that's very true.
Inevitably.
Yeah. So to back up a little bit, when we quit our jobs, we had a bunch of money saved up because we hadn't really traveled anywhere and our expenses were down given the situation in the world. And I think on top of that as well, there were still other sources of income that we both had. So it was one of those things where we didn't really need to look at YouTube as something that we wanted to monetize as quickly as possible. And that's led to a lot of good things for us, right? Because it means that we have that creative integrity in a way where we can make videos that we want to make. We can choose to work with sponsors that we really like, that have goods and services that we actually enjoy and use ourselves. And at the same time, we're not rushing to just make whatever video that we think is going to get us paid the most. It's more about what we want to create. And I think that's actually something that's really important.
I think for us, something we've said in the beginning, even though we were very excited to get our first sponsorship email, is that we do want to feature and talk about products that we would use ourselves or do use ourselves.
Yeah. So I was talking to a friend about this just the other day, who I met recently and I've introduced him to our channel and everything. And he was watching one of the videos and we had a sponsor call out and he was like, oh, okay, I'm going to ask you the question, do you actually like this product or is this just like a script? And I said, to be honest, we try all the stuff before we use it ourselves. And I think that's really beneficial because it's like if we end up really liking the product or liking the thing, then we can talk about it in a natural way versus if it's something that we don't actually like, I think it's really hard to sell it and it feels unethical as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best case scenario is that if we're already using the product, which has happened to us before, and then they reach out to us and we're like, this is great. It's like completely natural.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think ultimately one of the things that I brought up in my video where I talked about why I quit my job was really just that I followed this Tim Ferriss model of the 4-hour work week. And, we had a lot of discussions about this where we didn't want to just sort of work until we retire at 65 or something. We're in a stage in our lives where we don't have kids. We're not really financially burdened anyway. We're fortunate that we don't need to support our parents. And I think, the idea of taking a mini retirement where we still had sources of income outside, which maybe weren't nearly as substantial as what we were doing before, but we were allowed to sort of creatively pursue something or do something that was interesting to us, was very appealing at the time. Yeah. That said, I do think, we have been in discussions too of what is next for us. And I think there are some things on the horizon that we're thinking about and potentially going to pursue. So, this will stay constant with the whole YouTube thing, but at the same time, we'll probably be doing other things on top of that. So the fourth and final bucket is what's next for the channel. And I think we're kind of figuring that one out ourselves.
Yeah, we are definitely still in the process of doing that, as we already talked about earlier in this video. And I think right now we're just very much still getting back in touch with a lot of the things that we cared about when we first started the channel and were big reasons as to why we started the channel.
Yeah, I think the challenge as a creator, and this is kind of always a thing that's on the minds of people who are making videos or making any type of content, is always trying to tell interesting stories or share interesting things that you think will benefit your audience and that you really care about as well. Because that's kind of the perfect balance, if you will, of finding those two things.
I think it's also genuine. It's very hard to talk about something that you don't actually care about and pretend you do.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's not something we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And while we're on the topic, and maybe just as a closing thought, it's been really fun creating content, and we've learned a lot about ourselves and have grown a lot as people just doing this. And it's something that we definitely recommend everyone try. So if you've ever thought about starting a YouTube channel or creating content in any way, definitely give it a shot. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and thank you so much for all the support towards our channel and to our videos. We wouldn't be here without you guys.
We really hope that you guys continue to enjoy the content that we put out, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Also, like the video.